sounds like this next version of FSD, FSD version 14, due in around 6 weeks, is going to be really good. So much so that they're willing to open it up to the general public. And I think that's what open access means. I don't think open access means like just the Tesla owners. To me, that I'm reading that as like general public. But nonetheless, I think this is hugely bullish.
There's often a lot of tribalism in tech, right? You know, Windows versus Mac. And when I was growing up, the Mac people would always say, oh, Windows is trash. You know, what the hell? What are you guys doing? And the PC gamers would say, the Mac sucks. You know, you can't play any games. And same with iOS and Android. You know, you still see people arguing about the iPhone sucks or Android sucks or, oh, you have green bubbles.
Welcome to the Gigacast. My name is Gav, here today with Omar and Sawyer. And Tesla has a whole lot going on in the world of Dojo, Robotaxi, and so much more that we're going to cover. If you're watching here on YouTube, please go ahead, do us a favor, and smash that subscribe button. We love how many watch our videos. Do us a favor, hit subscribe, like, comment. Let's get right into things here. So, Omar, I want to kick it off with you. There's been a lot of news in the past week around Dojo, something that we've talked a ton about in Spaces on the show before, but that Tesla is dismantling now. Plenty of people have probably heard about this, but there are many still in the dark. What's your thoughts when you saw this happening?
Hey, yeah. So my thoughts are really, I don't think it matters much. Tesla really has been doing their training on the Nvidia cluster for their FSD models, for their Robotaxi models. Dojo is a project that started in 2019. Tesla hoped that they could replace Nvidia in the data center the same way they have in the cars. And they didn't really do that. They're still training on Nvidia today. Now, for Dojo 3, rather than doing a standalone Dojo 3 design, Elon has said that he wants to use the AI6 chip, try and converge the design of Dojo and AI6 so that they're using one chip design, and try and build out Dojo 3 from that. So my take on this is really, I don't think they've seen that much success replacing their Nvidia training compute with Dojo 2. I'm not sure this Dojo 3 plan will have that much more success. But really, in terms of day-to-day operations, I don't think it changes very much. I was sad to see that Pete Bannon is going to be leaving the company, but he's been there for many years. He's been serving for a very long time. The AI5 design is now finalized. They're now working on AI6. I think he's leaving behind a really capable team. So disappointing to see, but sometimes I think as an executive, you have to make tough decisions. I think this was ultimately a resourcing decision. The way things are going with auto sales declining, less earnings, I do think it's going to be a money saver to focus on one chip design for AI6 rather than doing a separate Dojo 3 system and an AI6 chip.
Quick question on that. Obviously, Pete Bannon, like you said, leaving. It looks like a group of the employees that are working on Dojo, and I believe Pete Bannon's also doing this, are moving over and creating a separate external company. Have you looked into that at all?
Yeah, I did hear about that. I think really probably some of the people who were working on this dedicated Dojo supercomputer were very bought into the idea. They were probably sad to see it not get the resources that they wanted. But it just hadn't really been that much of a success for Tesla. So I think it's great they're trying to make some impact through an external startup. I wish them the best of luck. They're all super bright. But it's just very tough to take on Nvidia. Nvidia is very good at what they do. They have a tremendous amount of support across the industry, great software drivers, and it's tough to really build something that's better than what you can get from Nvidia.
Yeah, sorry, I want to comment here. Evan's screen sharing in line with what Omar was saying about not wanting to divide resources.
Yeah, I think, if Tesla's efforts to create a dedicated training chip had gone so well that they'd be able to compete with Nvidia technology, I don't think Elon would have made this pivot. And, this is not to say that Dojo was a failure. I think Elon is a leader that takes a lot of risks, more so than probably most CEOs. And so that means you're going to have projects that don't pan out the way you want, and that might just end up ending in the end. And I think the media obviously was quick to label this as a failure, but really in business in general, you never really have 100% successes. And I think Dojo was created as a hedge in case Tesla, one, couldn't get enough compute capacity, but also potentially as a path towards cost savings by not having, to source third-party chips from Nvidia and whatnot. And potentially another additional source of revenue, because you could sell these chips to, other companies and whatnot, or as a cloud service even. But it didn't work out, unfortunately, and I think in the way that Elon wanted originally. And so he cut bait. And I think it was worth a try. And you don't really become a $1 trillion company by not trying things. And I think now the question is, what is Dojo 3 going to be like with the AI 6 chip? And will it really be as good as for training and inference? Because historically, those two things are quite different. Their needs are quite different. I know Elon said there would be some convergence. I don't know how well the hybrid system will work, as well as, like, let's say a dedicated training chip would have. But it looks like Tesla's Cortex 2 supercomputer at Gigacast will have NVIDIA GPUs. And so I think this is just one of those things that Elon tried, and they weren't able to make it work out the way they wanted. So they pivot, right? And they refocus their efforts on probably the more important chip, which is that AI 6 chip, those inference chips within the cars themselves. I think that was more important because they can just get chips from NVIDIA. And yes, it would have been a cost savings if they had Dojo working really well, but it didn't work out. So it is what it is. I don't think it'll be that material to Tesla long term.
Yeah, so they're now obviously utilizing both NVIDIA and Samsung. It's a $16.5 billion investment, I believe. I have a question, Omar, because I also know that you invest in NVIDIA as well. Do you see this as almost like a boost to NVIDIA of Tesla saying like, hey, like NVIDIA's got, the lead here, decades of experience with building these chips. It's not worth it for us to try to compete here.
To be honest, Gav, it seems like kind of a nothing burger compared to how much people have talked about it, because the fact is they weren't using these Dojo computers at all, really. I mean, they said they were using it for less than 10% of training. 90% plus was on NVIDIA. So my sort of projections as both an NVIDIA shareholder and a Tesla shareholder was they're going to continue training on NVIDIA. I thought the chance of success with Dojo is small. I don't think they're 100% giving up on creating their own training supercomputers, but the probability of success is still small. So I don't think really much is changing there. They did the Dojo 2 design. We'll see if they actually ramp that up or not. But this is not really, I think, that much of a change in outcome.
Got it. I will say I looked into some notes, and it did say that by making this pivot, Tesla has likely accelerated, and I don't want to misquote, but from what I was seeing, it said Tesla has likely accelerated their timeline by 12 to 18 months here by prioritizing basically faster deployment over in-house chips. So have you any thoughts on that, on kind of like the timeline shift?
I mean, I'm not sure it really saved them any time. Maybe it saved them some money. So I think this is just really about focusing on what matters, right? Why would you put chip designers and money and resources onto something that you're not going to use? I know Sawyer said it wasn't a failure. Maybe that's a little harsh to call it a failure, but when they started Dojo in 2019, they were hoping that they could buy less NVIDIA chips for training and build it in-house, just like they went from using NVIDIA chips in the car to using their own chips in the car. Well, it's 2025 now, 6 years later, and they're buying more NVIDIA chips than ever. I mean, it's almost comical how many billions they're spending on NVIDIA chips. So when you're designing a new chip, you need to make sure that it's not only as good as what NVIDIA is making today, You need to make sure that it's actually better than what Nvidia can make in the future. And that's the really tough part. If it isn't, then you're not going to use an inferior training system. You're going to end up buying Nvidia anyway. So that's really what it kind of came down to. Dojo was just sitting there and wasn't used at the scale their Nvidia cluster was. So it's a tough decision, but sometimes you just kind of have to look at reality and put the resources to where they're actually going to be useful. And the sad thing is, putting an extra $100 million into the Nvidia cluster is going to make the Robotaxi service better than putting another $100 million into Dojo today.
And at the end of the day, you can't really skimp on quality here when these chips are being used to drive cars that have people inside them, right? You really can't skimp at all there. And so I think from that position where it's a safety piece as well, you got to go in that direction. Great thoughts there. Any other thoughts on Dojo, Sawyer, before we move into more general Robotaxi updates here?
No. I mean, I think if, as Omar said, if Tesla were to invest a lot more into Dojo, it probably would have hampered their efforts in terms of eventually getting to full self-driving, Robotaxis and whatnot. So it just makes sense to buy NVIDIA chips, not fall into the sunk cost fallacy and continue to pour money into Dojo when really it won't really have a worthwhile payoff. So just get rid of it, pivot, focus on the AI6 chips and whatnot.
Got it. Okay, so moving into the Robotaxi area, there's a few general updates, but I actually do see them as pretty important. There was a comment from Elon, if we can screen share that, where he said that open access for Robotaxi is going to come in September. He was responding, here we go, to Michael. And I think Michael's question was well worded. If we were able to click that in and pull that up, he was like, I'm not trying to be a hater, you know, I'm just asking, you know, why do you still need a special invite? And so Elon saying open access. And then there was a lot of theories. Okay, where is open access coming? Right now, you have geofenced areas inside of Austin as well as in California. And the piece here, so Omar, you're saying presumably in Austin here. I've seen people saying presumably in California based off of another comment that came out from Elon a little bit later on. So there's different theories. Also, obviously, it's not going to be New York, but I'm sure you guys have seen they started putting up job hiring positions for the safety monitors inside of NYC. So it really seems like the expansion's happening rapidly now. And if you're moving to open access, that is a huge step. And I don't think people realize how much expansion you have to have there. So just some tweets from Farzad that I was looking through. He said, just for, you know, what he's looking at here. You obviously can't do open access with 10 cars. It's probably difficult to even do it with 100 cars. You need to be somewhere, you know, between 100 to 200 probably here. And then with those cars, you're probably going to need 2 people, right, per car for 2 shifts throughout the day. So you're looking at anywhere from 200 to 400 people that have to be hired within the next month, trained, right, and get into these cars. And then if you are expanding at that capacity to where you're saying, hey, we can go to 100, 200 cars, you have to have such confidence in the safety of these cars as well, right? And in the data and the training and everything along those lines. So are you hiring these people to, you know, the ultimate goal here is to get rid of that person, right? And so it's like, is this a 1-month hire or a 2-month hire? I have just been really fascinated by this because it does feel to me like they're scaling even faster than I thought they were going to. So Sawyer, I'll kick this one over to you first if you want to just kind of share your thoughts across the board as to what you're seeing.
Yeah, so one, this is happening quicker than I thought it would because I thought it would be more towards the end of the year. Second is open access. Elon is responding to a post that said Robotaxi, and currently Tesla's only allowed to operate Robotaxis in Austin, which leads me to believe Elon is referring to open access in Austin. But on the other hand, Elon is talking about adding 100+ cars to the Bay Area ride-hailing service. So I don't know.
Yeah, he specifies in his tweet like ride hailing because you can't say taxi in California, which is why people then theorize in California.
They also don't have the permit to be able to operate robotaxis yet in California. And I don't think Elon would say open access next month unless he had a firm feel that it was going to be, they were legally be able to do that next month. So that leads me to believe Austin. So I don't, but they're going to have to add more cars because there's only like a little over a dozen. And if you have open access, the wait times are going to be insane. So you got to add more cars. I think this also speaks to like Tesla's really confident in their FSD system. It sounds like this next version of FSD version 14, due in around 6 weeks, is going to be really good. So much so that they're willing to open it up to the general public. And I think that's what open access means. I don't think open access means like just the Tesla owners. To me, that I'm reading that as like general public. But nonetheless, I think this is hugely bullish. I think we all expected it to be invite only for a little while longer. It's only been out for less than 2 months. And by the time it's open access, it would have been 90 days roughly. So it's great progress. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I bought more Tesla off of it. Yeah, Omar?
Yeah, I think it is a huge milestone. I mean, I know that he said he was not trolling, but really this is something that a lot of the Tesla haters have been kind of banging the table on. I think what he's kind of trying to imply there is the reason there are invites required is that the service is so bad that they don't want people to see it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the case. You know, obviously we've ridden in the Robotaxi. You have MKBHD and Kyle Connor and many others, AI driver, really trying to put the Robotaxi system to the test, see where it works, where it doesn't. But, you know, opening up where anyone can request a ride is a big step. And you saw a similar thing with Waymo. First they had invites, then they opened to the public. So I think it's an important part of the process to
But I
make
think
sure
the
you're
Waymo
not...
invite only period, it lasted much longer, right? Than what
Oh, yeah.
this would be.
Oh, yeah, much longer. You know, so Tesla's moving very fast when you line up their timelines with Waymo. It's kind of crazy. But it's a big milestone to really have anyone be able to request a ride and try it for themselves. They are going to need to scale out the service to match supply and demand. You know, a lot of people talk about hiring the safety monitors, which kind of puzzles me. You know, it's not hard to hire a few hundred people to sit in the car and do nothing, right? You think about how many Uber drivers there are. There's enough Uber drivers to give everyone a ride who wants to request a ride. So for a much smaller service like the Robotaxi service, it's really not that difficult to hire a few people temporarily to act as safety monitors. So
There is a little bit of a process with background checking and other stuff like that, but I hear you.
yeah, I mean, you know, compared to making a car drive itself,
Yes,
hiring a
one's
guy
harder
to
than the
sit
other.
in the car is pretty simple, you know? So at a small scale, you know, maybe if you were managing like a million safety drivers, right? Then you start to get into issues. But a few hundred people, not going to be an issue. So, and of course, you know, they do want to get rid of the safety monitors as well. So to me, this is really them launching for real. When they kind of had an invite required, it was more of a sort of soft launch, right? Now, with no invite next month, it's open for real. Anyone can just go request a ride. Dan O'Dowd can request a ride. The media can go request a ride. So it's showtime for real next month when this thing opens up. And I think that he's probably talking about Austin first, but I think they want to expand it and open it to the public in all the markets they offer it in.
Oh, good old Dan O'Dowd. Those are going to be some fun videos. Looking forward to those. Yeah, absolutely. Question for you just on the amount of cars. So right now, Waymo says that they have, what, about 100 cars in Austin in that geofenced area?
Yep.
Yeah.
And you can't even request a Waymo directly. You know, it's kind of mixed in throughout the Uber app. So I think that that's one way that they can really manage demand for it is by having it mixed in. How many cars do you think Tesla would need in order to not have people have, you know, exorbitant prices and wait times?
The 100 that Waymo has is probably a pretty good benchmark. So I imagine that initially they're going to be seeing less riders than Waymo. You know, Waymo is in the Uber app. A lot of people use the Uber app. It's kind of the default. So I would think they probably need, you know, maybe around 50 cars would probably cover it. You really want to align supply and demand. So based on how many orders you're seeing, put enough cars onto the network that wait times aren't crazy, right? And you can even deal with wait times being, you know, 5 to 10 minutes while you scale up. But really just kind of align supply and demand. Make sure there's enough cars that people aren't waiting a ton. But, you know, they have, I think, probably around 20 cars on the network right now. I don't have an exact count, but that's kind of my guess by seeing some of the license plates people have sent in. So they could probably roughly double or maybe triple the size of their current fleet to 40 to 60 cars. And I think that would probably serve the public initially. Now, if the service becomes super popular and a lot of people are using it, then yeah, obviously you're going to have to add more cars.
I think it's going to have to be more than 50 for a couple of reasons. One is the geofence when Waymo had 100 is now like twice or three times as large. So people are having to wait longer. Another thing is, for example, when MKBHD went down there to Austin, he was only able to get a Waymo, I think, a third of the time that he requested an autonomous ride from Uber. The other 2/3 of the times, he just got a normal, gas car or whatever with a driver. And so we don't really know what the true wait times for Waymos would be if you could request a Waymo every time in Austin. And so I have to imagine that Tesla's demand would be significantly higher than the Waymo service, just because Tesla fans are crazy. They want to go test it out. It's going to be insane. So I think it's going to have to be well over 100 cars, I think, at least for the Austin area, especially because it's now 80 square miles, the geofence, and it's only going to grow, I think, to probably double what it is now. Because on the Q3 earnings call, Ashok, he said that they're going to 10x the geofence area from that point in late July. So that's well over, a couple hundred, almost a couple hundred square miles. And we've seen cars testing, the Tesla Model Y is testing with the rigs on top of the roofs 30 miles away from the current geofence, which is already 4 times larger than the original geofence. So I think they're preparing for a large expansion, maybe in tandem with this sort of open access launch. So I have to imagine we're going to see a lot more cars than what they have now.
Yeah, I mean, I would call that maybe like the Tesla diner factor. The Tesla diner, I was expecting to be pretty calm, but I was very wrong about that. It's very difficult to get in there still. There's still a line. So Sawyer might be right that if we see an insane amount of demand from people in the Austin area, they may have to put more cars on. But like I said, it's really going to be dependent on demand. I mean, right now, the Robotaxi app isn't even in the App Store. You have to get a test flight link. So they're going to have to actually get it on the App Store. We're going to see what demand is. Sawyer's probably right that demand from Tesla fans in Austin will probably be high. But they'll really have to balance out supply and demand. I do think often in self-driving, a small number of cars can serve a lot more rides than you expect, just because they're there, pretty much all the time.
Another reason I think they need a lot of cars is because Tesla's price is currently a little over $1 a mile. Waymo's is much higher than that. So if you're going to select a service, you're going to choose Teslas, not only because of the price, but I just think it's the better overall experience. So I think demand will also significantly outpace Waymo's for that reason.
Well, think about, how when you guys got this open access, you were flying down there to check it out, or not open access, but the invitation access. And you're talking about the diner, right? There were probably people that drove hours and hours and hours to get to that diner. And so you're going to have an open access launch. I know people are going to travel to try this out. And you're going to have probably much more demand in that first week or two than you're going to have after that. But the last thing that I think Tesla wants is, every article is, it took me, an hour to get a Tesla and then it was this expensive, right? I think like they're probably going to really try and satiate that initial flood of demand. And then maybe it'll kind of taper off from there. But I do think that they have to come out pretty strong off the bat, Omar. I mean, that would be my thought.
Yeah. And again, I think probably people are often surprised by how few cars can serve enough rides. But you're probably right. You're going to have journalists flying in from New York, from Los Angeles, you're going to have fans probably flying in from all over the country and even all over the world to try this service. So that's going to be a challenging thing for them to handle. I think maybe they're really looking at FSD 14 or at least some early version of it to really help them be able to deliver on scaling up the service in the way it needs to for an open launch.
This will be a huge moment for Tesla investors that have been waiting years for this moment. So if they can try this, they're absolutely going to fly in. I think the demand's going to be crazy.
I agree, especially for people who don't own a Tesla but are very invested as Tesla investors and have not had an experience to maybe try out, FSD that often or things like that, right? And this could be their first experience. You guys brought up 2 topics that I want to touch on. One is FSD 14. The other one was mentioned was MKBHD. we can hit on MKBHD, then move over to Tesla FSD 14. MKBHD did a review. Obviously, all of his reviews and videos go mega viral. Wanted to just get your guys' thoughts on watching it, thought it was fair, not fair, his points made, all those things. There you go, Omar.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was great to see. MKBHD is obviously one of the biggest tech reviewers out there. So, the fact that he's never taken a Waymo before or a Tesla Robotaxi before, and this is his first time, it's kind of amazing. It kind of just does show you how early on we are in autonomy. And I think it's great that people are starting to look at this. Analysts are starting to look at this. I think what a lot of people are seeing is that these sort of exaggerated media reports of issues were exaggerated. It's not that the Robotaxi doesn't have any issues, but people were really hyper focusing on some minor mistake when what Sawyer and I experienced is that the vast majority of rides are actually very good and that it's only getting better from here. So I thought it was a pretty fair review overall. I'm excited to see, more coverage from him and others of this Robotaxi service, especially as it opens to the public. And, ultimately, whether you think he was fair or not, or whether you think he did a good job, I know some people were saying reviews from people like AI Driver and Kyle Connor were a lot more detail oriented, but that's not really his thing. He's kind of giving a high level overview, and he's making a lot of consumers aware about Robotaxi and Waymo who weren't. So I think it's a great thing to see.
He talked a lot about tribalism in the space between Tesla and Waymo. Any thoughts on that? Sorry, before I go to you, Sawyer.
Yeah, I mean, there's often a lot of tribalism in tech, right? Windows versus Mac. And when I was growing up, the Mac people would always say, "Oh, Windows is trash. What the hell? What are you guys doing?" And the PC gamers would say, "Ah, the Mac sucks. You can't play any games." And same with iOS and Android. You still see people arguing about the iPhone sucks or Android sucks or you have green bubbles. The Waymo Tesla sort of feud, you often see it on Twitter. You see Waymo fans saying Tesla sucks. You see Tesla fans saying Waymo sucks. My perspective is really, I love both services, and I think there's actually a lot more love and respect internally. The fans may argue with each other, but, I know Waymo engineers, for example, who drive Teslas and who use FSD to take them to work at their office in Waymo. I know Waymo engineers who drive Cybertrucks and Model S Plaids. And on the other side, you have Tesla engineers who also use Waymo. I love my Tesla because it can take me from LA to San Francisco on its own. And I also use Waymo when I don't want to park. It's great to just have a fully driverless service that can drop me off. So there's a lot of competition, but I do see it as kind of the same on the EV side where, yes, we're all competing as EV makers, but we're also all united in the sense that we all need to build out charging infrastructure. We're all fighting against the Goliath that is gas cars. And I think it's really the same on the autonomy side. Everybody in the autonomous space, whether it's Waymo or Tesla, they want regulations to be updated. They want a lot of the same things. They're fighting against the same Goliath, which is everyone driving their cars manually. So competition's great. I think it drives a lot of progress. But Tesla and Waymo really are kind of working together, I think, here to make a difference. And people should kind of look at it through that perspective, I think.
Got it. Yeah, Sawyer, it looked like you were going to say something there before.
Yeah, I think MKBHD, he has over 30 million followers worldwide across YouTube, Instagram, whatnot. And so he does have a large influence. A lot of people do tune in and want to hear his opinion on things. And so, but when it comes to technology in general, though, I think he stays sort of surface level in terms of the depth he goes into, because he knows the average person watching that wants to see the technology review, they don't want to know the nitty gritty details, right? They just want to know, is this a good service or is this a good product? How's this compared to the previous version and whatnot? And so from that perspective, I think he did an okay job. I don't necessarily appreciate how he depicted some of the early Tesla invitees that got invited by Tesla to try out the service on launch day. He sort of labeled them, or us, I guess, in general, as sort of not transparent. But I don't see how we could be more transparent, because a lot of us filmed our entire rides, and we even live streamed some of them and put them out for the entire rides for the world to see and judge for themselves. I have yet to see MKBHD or other media publications that have gotten access to the service put out an entire ride. And so we just hear sort of anecdotal stories from their experience, right? Nonetheless, I think because his following is so large and most people haven't really been exposed to self-driving vehicles in general, let alone Tesla's Robotaxi service, this gave first-time exposure to a lot of different people that had never been exposed to the service before. So I think that's good, because you want a lot of people to be aware that Tesla's operating this service. And to be honest, he did show a couple clips in his video that was pretty impressive in terms of how the Tesla Robotaxi handled some situations. So he's a big creator. Obviously, people are going to tune into what he has to say. I think he probably doesn't necessarily like Tesla fans in general, at least the hardcore ones. You can kind of tell, but he tries to keep it fair for the most part. But I think it's good people are just getting exposed to this, and that these technologies are really just around the corner. It is wild that he had never tried a Waymo before, considering he flies out to, California all the time. So that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I think really for both the mainstream journalists and YouTubers, access is currency, right? To get access to a service, and you see this in MKBHD's videos all the time. Hey, here's the new phone, and I've been trying it for 4 weeks, right? That's what he's used to, where the company's really saying, here, we want you to have first access. And I think a lot of the media and YouTubers were kind of like, hey, why are these guys getting access? And I think Tesla obviously wanted it to be people who were more friendly, not people who wanted to take down the company. But there was a lot shared. There was Dave Lee sharing interventions. I don't think people were really trying to sugarcoat it. I think a lot of these people were investors who wanted the truth for themselves. But you can understand why people who are used to getting access or offended at not getting access, why they might kind of, put down the people who did get access. But, I sympathize with him a little bit. You have all these Tesla fans commenting under his post saying, oh, you're going to have to shave your head once the Robotaxi scales out. It can get kind of annoying, but I think, like you mentioned, he did a good thing here, raising awareness. This really isn't for the hardcore geeks. This is for your average mom and pop consumer who might see this video and go try the Robotaxi service when it launches to the public next month.
Yeah.
Yeah, awareness is everything. As much as it's hard to sometimes realize because we're so deep in the thick of it. There's so many people who have no clue that this is happening. I had, family in Texas, in the Austin area, and they were like, what? The cars can drive themselves? They were like freaking out about that. They didn't know. I remember talking with my aunt. I'm down here in Tampa right now. She's here. I was telling her about Tesla, and she goes, oh, like those cars are way too expensive, aren't they? I was like, no, they're pretty similar.
That is wild. That to this day, people think Teslas are like $70,000 starting price. That just goes to show you how little penetration there is in terms of knowledge that Tesla just refuses to address.
We will not advertise. Don't ask. Yeah. No, those are good points. Okay, so that's a lot of the updates there on MKBHD's video. Encourage everyone, go watch it for yourself as well. Let's roll back into a topic we were touching on, which was Tesla FSD 14. Omar, you had a tweet on this. It looks like it's about 6 weeks away. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what Elon tweeted out. So he said in about 6 weeks, they're going to roll out this 10x larger model. They're going to be calling it FSD 14. So, it's really been, I think, one of the longest periods we've seen since a major FSD update. FSD 13.2 started rolling out in November 2024. Here we are in August 2025. They're looking at an end of September release for FSD 14. I think it's going to be a huge improvement. You know, they've never scaled the model up 10x larger before. This sort of, anytime you scale the model up, it just becomes more intelligent. So I think this is going to be really major, not just for the Robotaxi fleet and for the expansion of Robotaxis, but even just to deliver something to customer cars that I think is going to take it to the next level. We are seeing a lot of people who are very happy with FSD 13. It is doing very good on safety. It's able to, really make your car feel like an autonomous car almost. But we are still seeing people report issues with, for example, navigation, mapping, a few issues here and there, Cybertruck. So there are definitely, I think, a lot of improvements that could be made. I think a lot of these Robotaxi improvements are also going to come into the main car software. And that'll hopefully be helpful for vehicle sales, really just trying to drive down this point, which a lot of people probably don't realize, which is that you can go buy one of the Robotaxis in Austin, right? Just like Sawyer did. You can order the car, you can start using it for your own drives. And that really, I think, is a key selling point that the whole industry is moving towards. You hear GM talking about personally owned autonomous vehicles. This is what the industry wants to create, and Tesla is the only company that actually has it today.
I think this is the first time we've seen him mention FSD version 14. Like that's this new version, the 10x parameter version will be called that, right? I think that's the first time. So that suggests it's a big update. Do you think this we'll be getting, once we get this update, we'll be getting close to hardware 4 sort of capabilities, or is there still more headroom to go?
I feel like they're probably making it as big as they could make it for AI4. Scaling up the model beyond this, I imagine, would probably require AI5 and beyond.
Yeah, that's sort of my general feeling too. This is an Elon timeline, so I think we should take this with a grain of salt. But it's going to be 10 months between when sort of FSD version 13 came out, or the latest FSD version, to when we get this. So this better be a good update. And I think it will be, based on what we've seen with the Robotaxi service. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I remember how excited you guys were when you got FSD 13. I can only imagine a 10x increase from there. And like you said, Omar, great timing as well with this coming out and then being able to help with the open access, right? Get this on the road in those areas, really improve on navigation. Absolutely is going to be an important one, right? Speed, timing, safety, all those things.
Yeah, I mean, my car is able to just kind of do almost every drive. I push a button and it takes me from parking spot to parking spot on its own. So the 10x larger model, I mean, it's almost kind of hard for me to imagine how it gets much better from here. I'm not seeing a lot of the issues that people in other parts of the country are still seeing, but they're really focusing on just dialing down the long tail of safety, just making it really, really rock solid. I think this is really going to help them get rid of the safety monitors. I think things like really rare scenarios, safety issues like emergency vehicles, this is all going to be handled kind of like a Robotaxi. So you've never really seen that before, where Robotaxi quality software is running on a consumer car as an ADAS system.
The biggest issue I have with FSD version 13 currently is that when you're in like a transition zone from, like, let's say you're going 55 and then you head into a 35 or 30 zone, FSD I find often has a hard time figuring out, okay, how fast or slow should I be going? And especially if there isn't like a speed sign, for example. Maybe that's just due to the mapping issues. I don't know. So I'm hoping FSD version 14 sort of works those things out.
Yeah, one thing which I was thinking about, Omar, is that the areas that you drive in the most is probably one of the areas where Tesla has the most data from, right? In that California area, there's probably not a ton of edge cases that they have to still solve there. But as they go into more rural areas, right, around the country, around the world, maybe that's where it really, really makes a difference, right? Somebody who's living in like a rural village or whatever now, their car is doing so much better and not having to be careful. So maybe it's pieces like those.
Yeah, that's really the tricky part of self-driving. The whole challenge is making it work anywhere across the country. There is a massive difference in driving environments across the country. So, Sawyer might be reporting that it's having trouble choosing the speed. Well, here where I am in Los Angeles, you just go as fast as you can, and you're really limited by traffic. So even road structures that look pretty similar can be pretty different. And it needs to not just work in the cities. I mean, that's going to be the major focus for robotaxis. It needs to work in the suburbs, in the rural areas, in the farms. And that's really the huge challenge of self-driving.
And inclement weather too, which is the snow.
Right.
Snow is tough.
Yeah, rain, snow, it's handling rain all right. You notice their initial deployments, both for Waymo and Tesla, they've been kind of avoiding the snowy areas, but you can't avoid them forever. A big chunk of the country has snow for a decent chunk of the year. And yeah, there's a lot of scaling up to do.
It's possible that this winter could be the first time that we see at least Waymo self-driving vehicles in snowy cities operating. So it's gonna be really interesting to see how they handle that. Elon did say 50% of the population covered by the end of this year. I don't know if that means snowy cities. Probably not. But Waymo has already been testing in Boston for a while. They're in New York City as well. They don't have a permit yet for New York City, but it's going to be interesting to see how they handle this inclement weather. Because so far, they've really only stayed to sort of more drier or at least warmer weather states and cities. And so they're venturing up north finally.
I'm super curious on it as well. When I first started really deep diving into Tesla at the end of 2018, I would say, was when I was really starting to do my research. I was very much in the thought process that LiDAR was the way that they were ultimately going to go, specifically because of snow and snowy conditions. And Waymo is obviously going to take that approach, right, into these areas. And so I'm super excited to see Tesla do it with computer vision and what that looks like in difference to LiDAR. One other piece on that, I'm curious where you guys think that they're going to expand to next, because it does feel like they're doing rapid expansion at the moment. And like we talked about, New York already started some hiring. I'm curious if you think that it's far off for them to end up in Arizona. I was actually a little surprised that they haven't done anything, in Scottsdale and these other areas where Waymo really, built that base out of. Do you think that we see that soon?
Since our last episode, I did reach out to the Arizona DMV to get an update on the permit that Tesla applied for, both to be able to operate robotaxis with a driver and without, essentially ride-hailing service with the drivers. And a decision was expected in late July, and I reached out and they said it's now expected by the end of August. And so I don't know what the delay is about, but I do expect probably the Phoenix metro area would be the next target for Tesla outside of California and Texas. If not, maybe Nevada, but I have to assume probably Arizona, because Waymo's already operating there, and it sounds like they're further along in the permit process than they are in Nevada per se. So, yeah, they said keep reaching out as much as you want, so I'm going to keep bothering them and see when they finally get their permit, because that'll be a big deal.
Yeah, I think Arizona is definitely one of the target markets. Basically, any place with Waymo, they have a regulatory infrastructure in place for self-driving. So I think they are going to expand into into Arizona. I think that's definitely on the top of their list. On the subject of LiDAR, snow is difficult with any sensor modality. Whether it's vision or LiDAR, some people might think LiDAR is just sort of an easy solution, but the reality is when you have these LiDARs and they're spinning, well, what if they get covered by snow and ice? What if the snow and ice block their ability to spin, right? So you need some kind of heating element. Then the other issue is the LiDAR actually picks up each individual snowflake. It's really that precise that it picks up each individual snowflake as an object. So now you need to filter out the snowflakes. You need to make sure that you're still detecting the cars, but you're not detecting, a piece of snow or ice that's falling. So it's very challenging, whether you're using LiDAR or you're just using computer vision. There's a lot of challenges associated with it. So That's really the reason Waymo hasn't gone into a lot of these snowy areas. I think it's time. They've shown that they can really handle good weather with really strong safety. And, when you look at the crashes that are killing people, often they're happening in the snow. Often they're happening in bad weather. That's when people really lose control. So to really bring the benefits of autonomy to everyone and help prevent a lot of these crashes, inclement weather is going to be a key piece of that. And again, it just shows how early we are in self-driving, that we don't have self-driving cars in the snow yet.
Plenty of time, plenty of time. Sawyer, you had a tweet, if we are able to pull this up, that Elon shared out. This is kind of switching topics a little bit here, but just talking about the demand that we're seeing right now of people buying Teslas. So, partially because some of the discounts are ending. There's a few other pieces happening here. And in addition to all that, you've also been able to have discussions with some of these Tesla executives about end of quarter demand. So we'd just love to turn this over to you to hear about that.
Yeah, so on the Q3 earnings call, Vaibhav, this Tesla CFO, warned people that as the end of quarter draws closer, we're going to start pulling back some of these incentives, and wait times could get longer. And it became clear to me in the weeks after that people simply did not believe them. Because I was getting DMs from people, hey, should I wait till September to see if incentives are better? Because historically, it is true. Tesla offers the best incentives in the last month of a quarter to be able to juice those final minute sales. And so I think a lot of people are going to take that same approach this time, despite the fact that the $7,500 federal EV credit is ending at the end of September. And so I've been warning people, hey, don't wait to order, because there's going to be a delivery hell situation in September, and where you might not even be able to take delivery of a Tesla that you wanted, because it's just going to be a rush of people trying to take last minute delivery to be able to take advantage of that EV credit before it disappears completely. And I told a couple of Tesla executives, like, people don't believe you guys that you're done introducing incentives. Like, people still think you're going to introduce 0% financing or whatever for the Model Y, or free supercharging or whatever. And so I told them, you got to do something, because people are just going to wait, and it's going to create a horrible situation in September. And then that's when we saw a couple executives in the Tesla account sort of ramp up their efforts to tell people, look, incentives are actually disappearing. And then since then, we've seen lease prices go up for the Model Y, at least. I think the 3 maybe too. We've already seen inventory discounts starting to disappear for the 3 and the Y. And we're seeing wait times extend significantly, more than double for the Model Y, and some trims of the Model 3 from 1 to 3 weeks to, in most cases, 4 to 6 weeks. So even if you order a Model Y now, there's no guarantee that you might even be able to take delivery by the end of this quarter. So once that stuff started happening in the last few days, I've gotten a rush of DMs from people saying they pulled the trigger. We're seeing people post publicly on X that they pulled the trigger. And so I think people are finally waking up to the fact that Tesla is done introducing incentives. And Raj, who is the new head of sales in North America, he did warn people publicly in the last couple of days, saying we're going to cut the amount of incentives for the inventory vehicles soon. So, get your orders in now. So I feel for the Tesla team. I did get one DM from someone that said that his delivery was delayed because the service center that they're at, or the center, delivery center, the staff is just super overloaded. They said they're trying to deliver hundreds of vehicles a day right now. And so it kind of feels like it did a couple years ago when demand was just through the roof. Yeah, there you go. So it's going to be crazy for September, and then it's going to be really interesting in October when that EV credit's gone. How does Tesla adjust its pricing, if at all? I think a lot of people expect Tesla to adjust their pricing downwards by $7,500 because, this EV credit is $7,500, so it makes sense. I don't think that's what Tesla's going to do. I think at most Tesla might reduce 3 and Y pricing by, $2,000 to $3,000 at most. I think in general the launch of the Model Y L, which I have to imagine is going to come to America because that just makes sense to me. Americans love their large SUVs, and then the launch of the Model Y Performance probably will happen early Q4 is my guess. And then my guess is another model, a more affordable Model Y, sort of a stripped down Y, will launch as well. So you have these 3 new trim/models, which will help juice Q4 sales and demand, which will enable Tesla not to need to necessarily introduce as many promotions, incentives as they otherwise maybe would have. But we'll see. Obviously, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I don't know what models are going to launch or when, but that's sort of how I see things potentially playing out.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of drives me nuts because this is really a product that could improve your quality of life so much. I'm going to all my friends, all my family saying, look, get your orders in. This is something that is going to change your life. It could even save your life. And, you know, everyone who gets one of these cars, they come to me and they're just gushing about how much they love it, how much better it makes their life. And this $7,500 point of sale tax credit that just comes off right at the dealer, you don't ever see it. It's an amazing deal. And I think if people knew about it and they knew what the product is and that the government is buying it for you, $7,500 off for free, they would be rushing to get it. I mean, you don't want to be waiting until the end here because you have to actually take delivery by September 30th. My guess is it's going to get crazy. There's not going to be much inventory left over. And in terms of Q4, if you're expecting to get a cheaper Model Y because of the reduction in the tax credit, what you're probably going to get is a low-end Model Y. That's a few $1,000s cheaper, I think. Not the same Model Y. So I would definitely take advantage of this opportunity if you can. Don't make the mistake of waiting. Go to your relatives, go to your friends, make sure they know about this because, I mean, $7,500 is a lot of money.
I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla does not lower prices at all in Q4. I think the introduction of these other models is going to offset that, and so I don't think people should wait.
Yeah, I wouldn't risk it.
There you go. If you're thinking about it, now might be the time. I'm going to do one last topic here in that Ford area. Before we get into it, appreciate everybody that's been watching, making it this far. If you've gotten through all of this, we would love for you to go ahead and subscribe to the channel and also drop a comment below. We're trying to respond to more of these comments. We read the comments, love to get them on a weekly basis. So appreciate everyone that does drop them, like, subscribe, comment, and let's go into the last topic here for this pod, which is going to be Ford. And really, I think just more and more companies investing in EVs. So Sawyer, you had a tweet about this, so I'll turn it over to you to cover.
Yeah, let me pull up my bookmark real quick. So Ford had been teasing that they've been working on sort of a new production system and a new, more affordable electric vehicle models to sort of steer them into more of a profitable endeavor because currently they're losing their money over their fist on their current electric vehicle lineup. And so this new effort, which they're calling the Ford Universal EV Platform, is really geared towards, and I don't want to say it's exactly what Tesla's unbox process is, but it's somewhat similar in that it takes sort of a system that was sort of like a tree branch system and it sort of streamlined it into one line and just simplifies everything. And it reduces parts by 20%, 25% fewer fasteners, 40% fewer workstations dock to dock, and lower cost of ownership because they can lower the price of the vehicle. And so they're going to start with a new mid-size pickup truck with this new system in 2027. Ford says it's going to start at around $30,000. And this new system enables Ford to sort of create a lot of different vehicles on a similar platform. And so I guess they're calling it, they're transforming it from the traditional assembly line into a sort of assembly tree, I guess I should say. It was sort of the opposite of what I was saying. Instead of one long conveyor belt, there's like 3 sub-assemblies run down their own line simultaneously and then joined together. And then they'll incorporate large piece, single aluminum castings and whatnot. And so I think this is Ford's effort into making profitable EVs. Not sure they'll be able to deliver on it. $30,000, promising $30,000 2 years in advance seems like it's kind of a losing strategy. I don't know if they'll be able to deliver on that. But they're going to use LFP batteries for these vehicles from plants in the U.S. So they're not going to have to import Chinese LFPs, which is important because they won't have to pay any tariffs on that stuff. And then they're going to invest $2 billion extra into their Louisville assembly plant to be able to incorporate this new production system. Ford was really the one that sort of pioneered the production line system way back 100 plus years ago. And so I think their thinking is that we're doing it again here with this new assembly line system or production system. And I think their hope is that it's going to strip so much cost out of the vehicles that they'll finally be able to make EVs profitably and be able to lower the cost of their EVs. Because right now the ASP of their EVs is quite high for most people. So I guess we'll see if they can deliver. They're still a couple years off, and they've made a lot of promises. I think they're going to be hard to deliver on, but we'll see what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, you can really see the Tesla influence here in this presentation. I think they even used phrases like the best part is no part, It's like, hey, these guys are Tesla fans. So I think that's great to see, just the impact Tesla's had on manufacturing, to the extent that the company that invented the moving production line is now looking to Tesla to figure out what to do next. You hear them talking about unicasting. That's their term for gigacasting. Shout out to the Gigacast. And, you hear them talking about the assembly tree. This is really similar to Tesla's sort of unbox process. So, look, I think it sounds great on paper. In reality, Ford used to be the number 2 EV seller in the United States. They've now been overtaken by General Motors, General Motors, who totally did not have their house in order. They're still losing a ton of money on every EV they sell, which is, to be expected. Most legacy automakers are still in the same place. But we've heard a lot of promises over the last few years, especially sort of at the height of the EV bubble, where automakers pulled out. As soon as EVs stopped growing as fast, they just said, you know what, never mind. We're going to scale back those investments. So do they actually deliver on this in 2027 or not? We'll have to see. I'm not going to give them full credit for a presentation. And, frankly, things are changing so fast with AI, manufacturing processes, autonomy, that who knows what the vehicle market looks like in 2027. Is there a market for a $30,000 electric truck? I think there probably is. I hope Tesla does a smaller electric truck too. But at the same time, there might not be a market for a vehicle that is not fully autonomous in 2027, 2028.
That's a big issue I see with Ford, is that I hear all these things about more affordable EVs and this and that. I almost hear nothing about their autonomy strategy. I don't really hear much about what they're thinking long term, what their plans are. Their Ford Blue Cruise is pretty mediocre, to be honest, compared to the competition. It only works on select highways. And so it's not hard to imagine that things are moving so rapidly with self-driving AI that Ford just kind of gets left in the dust a little bit if they don't sort of figure out their autonomy strategy, because that is the future of the automotive industry. It's not $30,000 pickup trucks. I think it'll still sell well 2 years from now, but more, even longer term, autonomy, you have to hop on the bandwagon and figure it out quickly, because otherwise you're just going to be left behind.
Yeah, it's a little bit cloudy to kind of see what the future of the automotive industry looks like in 2 to 3 years, but I think it's going to look a lot different than it does today.
Yeah, 2027 feels like right around the corner. So my timeline might be a little bit longer for no demand for cars that are not autonomous. Maybe 2030, who knows? But I hear what you're saying, the direction that this is going, and it's clearly happening, and everybody's hopping on the bandwagon. Really, really great thoughts across the board here. Hopefully this was helpful for people who still had questions around Dojo. Is it big? Is it small? What's happening there? The Robotaxi expansion and everything else that we covered. Omar, any other final comments for the Tesla world today?
Look, I mean, we're really witnessing something here that is a complete transformation of not just Tesla as a company, but the way we consume transportation. Right now, you have to go buy a Tesla and get a loan to try FSD. A month from now, you'll be able to just download an app in Austin and request a ride. And I think you're going to have more people experiencing autonomous driving than ever. You're really just seeing such a rapid pace of AI advancements. I mean, it feels like every week there's a new announcement from an AI lab or a new city that Waymo's going into or that Tesla's going into. Things are moving very fast, and I think most people still don't appreciate how much this is going to change the way we live and how fast.
Sawyer, any final comments from yourself?
If you live in the U.S. and want to take advantage of the $7,500 EV tax credit, do not wait to order. Order now. You lock in your price and incentives. Tesla's going to continue to strip away incentives. I think the vehicles are just going to get more expensive as the quarter draws near because of that. And so don't think September is going to roll around, you're going to see 0% financing and stuff. No, the wait times are already increasing, which tells you that demand is really high right now because of this end of the EV credit. So order now. Don't wait.
Once you order your Tesla, make sure that you send the screenshot to Sawyer so you can make it into his montage for the post.
Yeah. Use someone's referral code too. Get 3 free months of FSD. Try it out.
Yeah. Where can they find your guys' referral codes?
Mine's maxed out, so I can't give it out.
Omar, are you maxed out?
Yeah, I think I am too.
All right. Well, come to the Tesla Tuesday space, 12 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, hosted by Wolf Financial. And somebody always drops their codes in the comments, so you can find one there pretty easily. That's going to do it. I like that little Gigacast reference that we hit in this one. That was fun as well. Appreciate everyone that tunes in. We'll be back with another amazing episode next week. Take care. See you on the other side.